Hello everyone, this is Melissa and Ian of Havencraft, and today's class is part of our ongoing series on Cartomancy and Tarot Spells. Today we are actually going over the aces of the Minor Arcana. We're doing one of our more in-depth studies of how to use the aces for things like interpretation in multiple styles, divination, spirit communication, and spells. We're going to start with a little bit of the history. The Minor Arcana actually don't appear on either the Carey sheet, the Rosenwald sheet, or really any of the old portrayals of the trumps that we've been going over where they were sort of allegories for daily life in the time and had sort of the archetypal portrayal.
These were generally commissioned by a wealthy or noble family and were almost a series of portraits as much as they were a divinatory tool, or and the minors weren't involved. They actually are thought to have come from a different source entirely,
which we'll be going over here. So where you start seeing the tarot as something less a sermon, like the Sermons de Ludo Kumali, less an allegorical portrayal of personalities that you would have seen at the time, is with the tarot cards, or taroki cards, which was a game that was similar to bridge, and it was played in Europe in the form of taroki appropriati, which were like stories that you would use originally these sermon portrayals that had been commissioned by wealthy families to tell kind of flirtatious stories about the lives of the women in the court. This ended up getting combined with a card game from the 1370s, sort of 1375, 1378, which is when playing cards as we think of them, with cups, swords, coins, and staves, ended up coming into Europe with the Muslim persons from North Africa, Spain, Sicily, and during the Mamluk Sultanate of Egypt. So actually, when people are like, oh, the tarot came from Egypt, what they're really referring to was a card game that contained the cups, the swords, the coins, and the staves came from Egypt. It came from a bunch of other places too, but that's one of the ways it came into the court, was via Egypt, and it combined with this bridge-like game of charades, which was the Major Arcana. So when people are like, oh, the Major Arcana came from a secret temple in Egypt, the only historical thing that came out of Egypt, the only thing anthropologists have been able to say, yes, this did come from Egypt, was actually the other chunk, the miners. The miners. So shortly thereafter, in 1392, a man named Jacquemin Grigonier was commissioned to paint a deck like the Egyptian ones for Charles VI of France. This deck ended up combining those Major Arcana from the Tarot, that card game that they were playing where they sort of made up stories, and the Minor Arcana of these decks that were coming over from Egypt and from the other Muslim nations. We only have 17 of these cards to this day. Like, that's all that still survives. In 1420, it became popular for the upper classes to mix again that tarot-key, the tarot cards, the Major Arcana, with the Minor Arcana, and commission an artist to hand paint decks and then coat them in gold on the edges in order to make them last longer. That's where this gold on the edges of cards.
The edges of your cards.
It was originally actual gold, and it was used to make the deck last longer. They invented all manner of different complex games that had different rules based on what family you were playing with. So with each deck would kind of come its own set of rules, and they were a combination, again, of those Major Arcana and Minor Arcana, but they weren't being used for divinatory purposes. They were being used
as cards,
as charades combined with a gambling game.
Yeah.
And this was around the same time that the priests started freaking out and saying, hey, this deck is used for gambling.
It can't have
It is
God
no
in it
longer
anymore.
a sermon. So you have to take all of the portrayals of religious figures off of it. This is when you start seeing them complain about it. 1422, the Visconti Sforza Tarocchi deck was commissioned by the Duke of Milan. This is one of the ones that we've cited a couple times as one of the older decks that we can look at, and it was painted all over with gold. It's really stunningly beautiful. And ended up being so popular that most of the later decks ended up kind of ripping it off, and it became standard around 1480 for the French to play with decks that had the hearts, the clubs, the spades, and the diamonds. They took the Visconti Sforza deck and kind of put their own little French spin on it, and those became the standard. 1487 is actually the first church documented period where the cards were used for divination. And the priests started saying, we are watching these noble people use this gambling game where they're supposed to sort of play charades and tell made-up stories about each other as sort of a, oh, well, I've seen this story come up before, so this means this will happen for you. So this is when the priests started freaking out and saying, not only are these cards that depict gods and angels and stuff being used to play a gambling game, they're being used to predict the future.
Right, they're being used to tell fortunes, which you're really not supposed to do.
So that wasn't until 1487. Shortly thereafter, in the 1500s, we see the invention of the Gutenberg press. So we see the cards start falling out of the hands of only nobility, where there are these carefully hand-painted things, to the hands of the common people. That's when you start seeing the Romani using this system to predict futures. It wasn't until it was a mass-produced thing that they could actually get their hands on that they were using it. Before that, it was more common to cast coins and bones and stones.
You can still do, you still told fortunes, but you did it by casting lots, was the technical term, I guess. And different people did that in different ways.
This ended up leading to a mass production that spread from Italy and France, where these cards were quite popular, to the rest of Europe. And then you see all manner of playing cards, where you could go and buy the Carte de Triomphe, and play all kinds of different divinatory games, non-divinatory games.
And that's actually kind of an important thing to note, is that initially the divinatory thing, the fortune telling, was a game. People didn't treat this as an oracle. It's not like the I Ching where this is a sacred oracle.
That didn't actually happen until 1781.
Yeah, but for a couple of centuries, this was kind of like you might get together with your friends in high school at a sleepover and tell each other, well, this is what's going to happen to you.
Well, you know those games that we used to play where we'd write stuff on a piece of paper and then fold it all weird, and you'd, like, unfold it, and that would be your fortune? That's what they meant by, like, doing fortunes.
Yeah, it wasn't this serious thing. It wasn't something that you turn to for major life advice. That's what I mean by it wasn't considered an oracle. It was considered a fun way of
kind of jokingly telling fortunes.
Yeah, and now you might have someone do it sort of satirically.
But then and I will say it was likely the Romani who popularized it as an actual occult tool. In that this was something that was being widely reproduced, was relatively inexpensive, that was already based in the archetypes of the areas that they were traveling through, and combine sort of the knowledge of the archetypes from these cards and basic common sense about the person you're talking to, and you could give relatively accurate fortunes.
And the other and also, unlike with casting lots, if you do, for example, the Grand Tableau, you can, or the web, you can spin it out for a long time. You can get someone into this and tell a really elaborate story. Unlike with, if you have a handful of 5 to 8 bones or coins, and you toss them, and you tell someone what they means, and they pay you when they walk out.
Yeah, that was a little more. This could drag it out. You could charge more. In 1781, Le Monde Primitif, the Primitive World, published in France by Court de Gébelin and Comte de Melay, is the first article to refer to the tarot specifically in occult terms. In this article, Melay makes the first recorded connection between the cards and the Hebrew letters or the Jewish Kabbalah. Gébelin himself makes the first recorded description of the tarot having any kind of Egyptian secret occult origins. So this myth that it had this secret origin to this temple in Egypt actually appears for the first time written down in 1781. And it makes you wonder how many fortune tellers in fairs or who were paid to come perform for the court had claimed this secret mystic history for it to have made it into this publication.
The other important thing of note is to put that into the context of the time. At the time, Egypt was believed to be the oldest civilization in the world.
Yep.
To have this very rich myth, which, by the way, we now know it wasn't, at least according to modern archaeological records, to sort of be the birthplace of mystery and magic. You hear stories about learning mesmerism or the use of magnetism. Sorry about that, we got interrupted. I was saying that in the context of the time, Egypt was thought to be the oldest civilization in the world, this great center of learning and mystery and magic where you could have learned things like mesmerism or magnetism that were becoming
a reminder that occult scientists at the time were charging a great deal of money for a demonstration of magnetism and that it was thought to be magic.
Yes. And so Egypt sort of was the Atlantis of the time, if you will. It was this mysterious civilization that most people couldn't possibly get to because travel was expensive, and that you could bring relics from or knowledge from to demonstrate your occult or magical prowess. So having Egypt in this cultural context be the place where this secret knowledge and wisdom came from made perfect sense.
So in 1788, the Atela Tarot deck is actually the first deck published to specifically be used for divinatory purposes.
So we give Atela some shit because Atela, that's why. But to a certain extent, Atela got there first, y'all.
Yep. Many of the designs were radically different. They didn't really match up with the Visconti Sforza deck. They didn't match up with the Sermons de Ludo Kumali. And really reinforced this idea of a mystic Egyptian origin. And this was because Atela had heard that these cards had a mystic Egyptian origin and sat down and basically tranced out to design his cards based on this idea that they came from this sacred temple. So you can actually go read Atela's write-ups of his trances as he came up with these cards. The meanings of each card were actually printed on the cards themselves. That's why we have such clear records of Atela's... My computer just powered off randomly.
And back on. This is why we have such clear records of what Atela thought of each of the cards meant, because he very helpfully wrote what it meant on the card, unlike today where you have to have it memorized.
Yep. So, by the way, if somebody tells you that you're using one of those like terrible beginner decks that has the definition written on the card and that means you're not doing this right, just point out that the very first deck that was published specifically for use in divination had the definitions right there on there. Okay, anyway, so in 1850s, the French occultist Eliphas Levi ended up really reinforcing that tarot was supposedly from the Kabbalah. And at this point, the origins of it coming from these sermons where traveling pastors would go around with these archetypal figures and tell you these allegorical parables?
Essentially, yeah.
In order to teach you moral lessons, had kind of faded into anonymity. And everyone pretty much believed, like, okay, these had secret occult origins, which they really didn't. Now, if you think about it like, okay, these cards came from like Christian pastors traveling around. And the fact that they hugely resemble the Kabbalah, well, Christianity is hugely based in Hebrew religion.
Yeah, let's be clear. The Old Testament and the Torah are
quite
pretty
similar.
close to the same thing. So
the fact that and then you got people basically weaving Kabbalistic symbolism back onto the decks more thoroughly later. But where that ends up coming out is with these decks like in 1909 when the Waite-Smith deck was illustrated, they threw all kinds of Hermetic symbolism and Kabbalistic symbolism onto the decks. And it really kind of clutters up the meaning, where people are like, you haven't thoroughly understood the Minor Arcana until you understand which Hebrew letter each of these is associated with and what Kabbalistic symbolism that has. And they came out of Egypt and they were a playing deck. And you can add as much sacred symbolism as you want to onto them, but the history just does not back up that claim. That you have to have memorized all of this super sacred information in order to incorporate the Minor Arcana.
I actually, I have been known to do readings with a regular deck of playing cards.
Which you absolutely can do.
Absolutely can. And when I'm doing that, because I don't have this memorized nearly as well as she does, I actually just take because the majors aren't there, so I take the 8th through 10 and just do Pythagorean numerology. There's no Kabbalah involved.
Basically, you can do this however works for you, because all the people who tell you that this is a super sacred system that dates back to the birth of Egypt have no historical evidence backing them up. So
now, if you want to break out the Hermetic Tarot, which we've got in a box over there, and has the most occult symbolism of any deck I've ever seen.
Sorry. Alright, so we are now moving down the definitions of the aces, and I'm going to start with a general assumption here. Aces are beginning. So if you are pulling them for a project, this is the beginning of the project and the tool that you need in order to accomplish the project.
Right, because aces are also tools.
Aces are also tools. So if you are pulling for considering school, and you get the Ace of Pentacles upright, okay, then this is a good path for you to be on. You pulled the Ace upright, but it also symbolizes the thing that you're going to need for school to succeed for you. In this case, that would probably be money. So, okay, we're gonna run through our different.
Right, let's see how fast we can.
Let's see how fast we can do this. Ace of Wands. Ace of Wands, Rider-Waite interprets it as creation, invention, enterprise, powers that come from all of these things. So it is the power of creation. It is the power of invention. It is the beginning. It is the source. It's also birth, family, and origins and virility, because it is a phallic symbol. Reverse, it's fall, decadence, ruin, perdition, also perish, to perish. So weirdly enough, death doesn't mean death, but an upside down Ace of Wands can mean death in Rider-Waite.
Tough.
Okay. It is fire in its inception. It is the solar phallic outburst of flame from which springs lightning in all directions. So basically the energy of manifesting as fire in kind of a phallic way. Okay. Aleister Crowley, we understand you so well. Golden Dawn, it is the radix of the powers of fire, and it represents force, strength, and energy which are available for you to use. So this is not just force, strength, and energy kind of over there. This is force, strength, and energy that is a tool that is available for you to direct according to your will. Mathers has it as birth, commencement, beginning, origin, and source. Reverse, it is persecution, violence, vexation, cruelty, and tyranny. Okay. Atela has it as birth, beginning, origin, creation, the principal source, new things, also family, lineage, posterity, and circumstance. Okay then. Reversed, he has it as a fall, wasting away, weakening, dissipation, collapse, ruin, destruction, damage, devastation, making mistakes, making errors. Theron's, it is tradition. It's the source, it is the principle, it is the beginning, it is the origin. And Paul Foster Case has it as initiative. So if that gives you kind of an idea, the Ace of Wands is all about inception, it is all about ideas, it is all about direction. You have your origin point, and now you are moving forward and manifesting energy in your life.
Cool.
Okay.
Next. Ace of Cups.
Which I picked up the wrong one. Cups. Rider-Waite has it as the house of the true heart. This is love, joy, nourishment, abundance, also fertility. And in that this is the divine phallic symbol. This is supposed to be the divine vagina. Reversed, it's the house of the false heart. So it's not being able to trust your feelings. Book of Thoth has it as the beginning of the water element. It is the seed of water, the holy grail, the divine vagina, the house of pure spirit. Golden Dawn has it as the radix of the powers of water, and it's pleasure, happiness, the influence of the Great Mother, who creates freely through the subtle pressure of her waters. Okay then. Mathers has it as feasting, banquet, good cheer, and upside down it's change and metamorphosis and inconstancy. Okay. Atela has it as a feast, coming forth in supplication for abundance, fertility, robustness, stability. So basically, creation and receiving from the font of creation. So very much the fountain of youth.
Yeah.
Reversed has it as mutation or transmutation or inconstancy. So that's, again, we have this idea that reversed, the Ace of Cups, is something being inconstant, untrustworthy.
This is something that comes up with water throughout the majors, you may recall. It also comes up throughout the suit of cups.
In the majors and in all of the suits, if water is upside down, if the water ends up at the top of the card like this, or the cups are pouring out, that's a bad sign. Okay, Paul Foster Case has this as the power of the Kabbalistic Kether, the crown of the creative world.
Okay.
Okay.
We'll get to those.
I will be running through them. I probably should have done it
with each one.
My
Ace
bad.
of Earth suit. Sometimes it's pentacles, sometimes it's discs, sometimes it's...
Pentacles, discs, coins,
Yeah.
all basically the same. Rider-Waite has it as perfect contentment, ecstasy, and gold. Like it literally represents gold. Additionally, he considered, Rider-Waite, they considered this the most favorable card. Like if you pull this for a reading, that is a good sign.
They were also a bunch of rich white guys.
Yep. Reversed, it was the evil side of wealth. So, something that takes prosperity and comfortable material conditions and twists it. So, okay. Book of Thoth has it as the Ace of Discs, the radix of the powers of the earth, and it is supposed to be the root of the earth element. Golden Dawn has it again as the root of earth, and it is the sense of material possessions. This can be anything from soaring wealth to crushing poverty. This is the material world. Mathers had it as perfect contentment, felicity, prosperity, and triumph. Reversed, it was still purse of gold, money, gain, help, profit, and riches. Atela's Ace of Coin represented felicity, happiness, rapture, complete satisfaction, total joy. Reversed, it was capital, principle, treasure, wealth, opulence. Same basic ideas, but more towards monetary and less towards safety. Paul Foster Case considered it the physical form. So this is the body that holds the primal will. So again, you get this emphasis of this is the material world, less about spirit, more about can I touch it? Can I hold it in my hands?
Can you poke the magic?
Can you poke the magic? Ace of Swords.
Finally.
Ace of Swords, Rider-Waite had it as triumph, conquest, and specifically a triumph using force. So you had to make something happen. Reversed, it's still attempted triumph through force, but the results are disastrous. Book of Thoth has it as the primordial energy of air. And intriguingly enough, in Thoth, air is a cutting force. So it is severance, it is greeting times of difficulty with intelligence. It is penetration of the matter, seeing to its core.
Mm-hmm.
Golden Dawn, the radix of the powers of air, great energy called to do good. Mathers has it as triumph, reversed is embarrassment. Atela has it as something that is excessive, extravagant, exceedingly passionate, something treated with vehemence or animosity. Also, momentum. Reversed, it's pregnancy. Okay. Paul Foster Case had it as associated with air, but also with the Ankh cross. His was more fiery air. It represented sort of invoking force, but also clarity and... Alright, so... Having run through all of that...
Masculine, feminine.
Why are you talking at me? Stop it.
Having run through all of other people's meanings, let's quickly touch on yours.
Yep. And we may have to pick up on this class next time as well.
Yeah.
The aces may take us 2 classes.
We spent a lot of time on the history.
So, we started with wands, so I'll start with wands again. Wands. Take a flashlight to your issue. See it clearly. Take time to direct your will in the form of finding out what is best in a set of circumstances. For you, for the other people involved. Seek clarity. If it's upright for something, that probably promises that this is a path that leads to the things that the wands promise. So wands promise clear opinions and passion. So if this is a love reading, okay, you're going to have clear opinions and a lot of passion. But are you also pulling cups? Are you looking for cups to be pulled in this relationship?
Right. If you're going for, we know exactly what we're doing and we're really into it, but we're not into it in a cups kind of way,
Yep.
then you're good.
Now, one of the things I pull this for a lot is people who say, hey, there's this thing that I think I'm really good at, and I kind of want to know if I could turn it into something that I would do for the rest of my life. Upright's actually a good sign. Like, if you're asking, I want to be a rock star. Like, I can play the piano, I can sing, I can play guitar, and a record label wants to sign us.
Should I do it?
Should I do it? And you pull this like this, that's a good sign. This is, you can turn the thing that lights up your world, your passion, the thing that brings you clarity, the thing that you feel you are good at, and actually make a living out of it. It lights up the rest of your journey. If it's upside down, maybe not.
Yeah.
Okay. Cups. Cups are the heart. That's one thing that basically everyone agrees with. If you were playing with a deck of cards, like a regular deck of cards, these are the hearts. That can be things that you deeply want. but it can also be the connections you have to other people, the emotional connections you have. So if you're doing a reading about love and you pull the heart upside down, that doesn't necessarily mean that the relationship is going to work out, but it does mean that your heart is invested, and it's not necessarily a bad thing that it is. If you pull it upside down, it's not a good thing that your heart's invested.
Maybe back off and take a good hard look at everything going on there.
Mm-hmm. If you're not pulling for a relationship and you pull the cup, a lot of people are like, okay, well, what do you mean? It means give more emotionally. Put some emotional labor into the situation. Your tool here that brings you success is emotional labor. It can mean look into your heart. What does your heart want? If it's upside down, then there's not a heart in this situation, because maybe it's broken, because the heart can't solve the issue, because you're not going to get what your heart wants.
Or, and this is something that we see, or that I've seen a few times, is you're right. Your heart is completely not in this. You're correct. Like, this is a reading for someone's work, for someone's employment situation. Yeah, your heart's not in it. This is not where you are emotionally invested. This is not where your passion lies.
But you still have to pay the rent.
But it is giving you a paycheck, and so you're going to do it anyway until you find something better.
Yep.
It's not even necessarily a bad thing
that your heart isn't in something. Some people actually don't ever want to do what they love for a job. Like, I love to paint, and nothing would make me hate it faster than to have to do it for a living.
Right. This is the danger of turning your passion into your profession. Now you have to.
Yep. And you can't work on the project that's singing to your heart. You have to work at the one that pays the bills. Okay. Pentacles. Pentacles don't just represent money. This is a problem that I've had over and over with people, because they're like, oh, it's a coin, it's money. It's safety and security and stability. It is the earth beneath your feet. In this world, that is often money.
But it can also be the things that you would be getting with that money that make you feel secure.
So your home, or it can be how you're getting to that money, like your schooling. Safety, stability, security. So if you're pulling it upright for questions of, hey, I'm considering taking this new job. Hey, I'm considering going back to school. Hey, I'm considering investing in this or that project. That's probably a pretty good sign. I mean, continue looking for how to make that be a strong, stable thing, but it's generally, when pulled upright, a good sign that you are building on stone instead of sand. If it's upside down, you're building on sand instead of stone. Now, maybe you can fix that. Maybe you can walk a little more carefully, delay going back to school until you've been at your work for 6 months, so you know when you ask them for the time off for school in the afternoons,
they'll say yes.
They'll say yes instead of no, because they don't want to train someone to replace you.
Also, occasionally life makes you tap dance on quicksand.
Yep.
Occasionally you just have to dance your way across it and make it work, and you'll get to solid ground when you can.
Yeah.
It's not a lot of fun.
But sometimes you have to do it.
But sometimes you have to.
Okay. Swords. I keep hearing from people that swords are just your mind. They're just intellect. Okay. You're right. It can be intellect. It can be applying yourself intelligently to the situation. But it's also cutting to the heart of an issue. Applying intelligence to see what is going right, to see what is going wrong, to see where you should apply thrust and where you should back off and defend. So think of it as, I am holding a sword. How do I use the sword in this situation? Am I defending myself? Am I cutting someone else out of my life?
Also, you see this reflected through our language. You have a keen intellect or a sharp mind. Your tongue could leave cuts. You're so clever. It's woven throughout our idiomatic English. And there's a reason for that.
Yeah, think on that. Because that's really what this is. In most cases, the sword is not trying to get you to actually go cut somebody. Weirdly enough, a couple times in my readings it has been. But most of the time it's like, look at the situation and be sharply honest with yourself. Don't be afraid of cutting yourself in having to look at this and decide how best to keep yourself safe and to have your intelligence be respected. I pull this card upright a lot for women who are having to learn how in the work environment to say, like, thank you, that was my idea.
I'm so glad you agreed with me.
I'm so glad you agreed with me. So upside down.
You also get that for you really need to look at your husband on the couch.
Yeah.
Still.
Why do I feel so unfulfilled and like I'm taken advantage of and like nobody sees me for who I really am and like nobody appreciates all the work I'm doing? And I pull the Ace of Swords upright and it's like, well, I hate to break it to you, lady, but you are actually a lot smarter than you're given credit. So be smart.
Right. You know.
You know. Also, this one gets pulled so often. This one and this one both. For you already know the answer.
Note, by the way, because we're talking about that, the ace is not, you know when you need to sever that.
No.
That's the 2.
Yeah, the 2 is you know who you need to cut out of your life.
The ace is you already know.
You already know the answer. You just have to be willing to stick to it. Upside down, you are not applying that clever intellect. You are not cutting to the heart of the issue. You are not thrusting to the core of what's going on here. In cases of, I'm not recognized for my intelligence at work, how do I fix that? And I pull the upside down Ace of Swords, it's like, you don't. They are not, like, they're not going to see it.
Yeah.
Okay. That is our class for this evening. We will pick back up on how to use these in spells and spirit communication and talking to gods next week.